Hey guys, what's up and welcome back. Just wanted to give a kind of like state of the season type of video here where we take a look at the rogue that I've been playing and kind of give an overview of where we're at and what we're going to try and do with the final month of the season. So, one of the patches during season one is they gave us an additional stash tab, and I just want to go over quickly like how I set up my inventory, where I'm at with leveling and renown, and then what I'm going to be doing with the Paragon board and the glyphs, right? So basically tying together all of the various systems. On the first tab here, I have every single unique that I've gotten dropped this season. A few of these are sacred rarity, right? Not many. And then the vast majority of them are ancestrals, right? So I've got two ancestrals equipped, I've got a condemnation equipped, I've got a pendant and greaves equipped, and I have at least one of every single non-Uber unique ancestral for the rogue. The two interesting ones that I have only one each of is the razor plate, and I know that this one can be very important for some people's build, specifically like the necromancer minions build. And there was a video of a guy who quit playing Diablo entirely because he never got this to drop on his hardcore necromancer. And I can understand that. I only had one of these drop, and with the rogue, this is the only unique chest. So when a unique chest dropped, I knew it was the razor plate, and that was kind of a cool moment. And then the temerity pants, which have gotten a significant buff in that the barrier that gets generated now is based on your actual max life and not your base life, right? So base life is just the life pool that you get from your level, which goes up to almost 8k. But then, in addition to base life, you also have max life multiplier nodes on the Paragon board. So 2%, 4%, that 4% can double to 8%, right? All those increased percentage max life nodes on the Paragon board, plus the rubies, which give 4% max life on the royal rubies, right? So now temerity scales off of true max life, which makes it so that if you have a max rolled 80% temerity, the barrier on that is extremely strong, much better than the aspect of the protector barrier that you could potentially get, right? So these are kind of all of our uniques. The ones that we would really consider using are pendant and greaves, and then the two daggers are the most kind of commonly used uniques, but I also think that temerity is pretty cool. There's definitely a place for that in your build. And then for the rest of the stash tabs, I basically have these broken out into offensive, defensive, and utility slash resource. And then the last tab is for gems, where the malignant hearts are included as gems. And then what I've been doing is using my gold to break down aspects that I want and just save them as aspects. And this helps a lot because the offensive aspects can appear on weapons, rings, amulets, and gloves. And I want to be able to keep everything organized nicely so that I know exactly what I have at any given time, right? So I'm basically just trying to keep weapons that can be a 4 out of 4 roll, with the exception of high item power weapons. So like an 814 crossbow, I'll keep this even though it isn't perfectly fixed. But the rest of them, I'm looking for things that I can roll into a 4 out of 4. So when I'm talking about a 4 out of 4, I'm looking for vulnerable damage, critical strike damage, and then either dex or all stats for the stats, and then like damage to close or damaged with core skill, and then maybe critical strike damaged with imbued, right? So I always have my spreadsheets here, right? And then go up to 150%, focus on the weapons. And really what I'm looking for is to understand what my primary and tertiary stat is for any piece of equipment, right? So for the rings, it's really easy to articulate. So for the rings, I'm going to always want critical strike chance, critical strike damage, and vulnerable damage as my 3 primary stats. And then for my tertiary stat, the 4th stat, the one I want the most is lucky hit chance, but I'll also either take max life or critical strike damage with imbued skills, right? So a good ring always has the ability to roll these 3 plus a tertiary, right? And earlier in the game, before you're working on your ancestrals, you can kind of take any combination of these things, but for endgame gear, you want to pick what are my primaries and then what's my kind of flexible tertiary, right? So if I think about that for two-handed weapons, right, my primaries are most likely, and this is where I'm not 100% sure, right? I know I want critical strike damage. I know I want vulnerable damage. Dex and all stats are kind of interchangeable, right? And then, either I want like core skill damage or critical strike damage with imbued skills probably, right? Maybe damage to close, but not necessarily damage to poison. That's too conditional, right? So it always helps to have the spreadsheet to help think about this, because the build guide, not the build guides, but the build sites, right? They only let you put 4 things on there. And what do I mean by that? Well, if I go over to my build planner, when you look at gear and stats, right, you can pick 4 stats to put on there, but it's not really helping you with the thought process of saying, well, which stats do I want for this particular build, right? So that's why I like the spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet I can list out everything that's available and then make decisions like I'm doing with the ring, where I'm not prioritizing max energy and resource generation for the rogue at all, because the rogue doesn't have any problem with energy generation. So really I want the damage, and then I want a tertiary, and lucky hit chance is going to be really good because there's lots of procs, but max life is also good. Critical strike damage with imbued skills can also potentially be good, right? So this is how we're looking at our gear. And then the other thing that we're doing is we're trying to save 2 each of aspects that we want to keep. So like, what's a good example here? Like pestilent points, right? So, I mean, how many pestilent points aspects have I dropped at this point? A ton, right? And I really only care about keeping the best ones, and I also really only need to keep 2, because what's going to happen is, I'm not going to be able to make that many different builds, right? So you want to be able to go into a different build and then come back to the previous build that you're on. So like right now, if I'm playing Cold and Shadow, just like speed farm twisting blades, right? It's my build right now is cold emphasis twisting blades, right? And when we go to play Uber Lilith, we're going to want to play the poison emphasis version of the build, right? And the poison emphasis version of the build is the bursting venoms build, right? So bursting venoms needs pestilent points. So I've kept 2 aspects of pestilent points, and I'm ready to go into this other build as soon as I hit 100 and fight Uber Lilith, right? So this is a codex power. You can get the 100% roll, the min roll from the codex, and I've only kept 2 of these, which have the max roll of 150%. And then if I get a legendary item and it's got pestilent points and it's got 150% pestilent points or less, and it's an item I don't need to keep, I can just sell or salvage it, right? That's kind of the idea, is if you gather up all of the aspects and keep them stashed, then you don't have to worry so much about analyzing every single item that you get. You know that, okay, I've already got my pestilent points aspect saved up. I don't have to worry about extracting any more of those powers, right? Same thing goes for armor. So I keep helmets that I might switch into, right? So everything should have, for helmets, it's really easy. I'm looking for max life, total armor, and cooldown reduction as the top 3 things. So any helmet I kept right now should have some combination of 2 out of 3 of those things so that I can roll it into a 3 out of 4, right? Or like this one is something I need to break down, the enshrouding, right? But all of these should have, some combination of CDR and max life and total armor. So like this one, for example, this one has CDR, max life, total armor, and a 4th flexible slot to roll into, right? So helmet is going to be the easiest thing to find because helmet only has 24 possible gear fixes on it, and then we only really need a 3 out of 4 for the helmet to be good. Compare that to chest, which has 32 possible gear fixes, and a lot of it is damage related. So like damage with cutthroat skills, damage with marksman skills, damage with imbued skills, damage with imbuement skills, right? There's all kinds of damage with on chest. 32 total fixes, and really all we care about is the defensive stuff. So it's very hard to find a perfect 4 out of 4 chest. It's pretty easy to find a 3 out of 4 helmet, right? But again, we're just keeping some of the good aspects. So like aspect of might, like aspect of disobedience, right? Protecting the bubble. Here's another might. So like for the mights, for example, I'm only keeping the max rolled 6-second mights, right? I've got a 60% Umbros in here. Got the bubble. There's a Stolen Vigor. Enshrouding, right? So the 4% enshrouding. So I've got another 4% enshrouding here. Another Umbros. 60%, 60%. Cheats that are like 20% or better. Here's the aspect of the protectors. This is a max rolled on a 779 item power. So this is giving you an example of what the protector barrier can look like. 5,742. My Eternal Run Barbarian would have loved having this. And then if you think about what the barrier can be with a temerity, right, you can see I've got 10,000 max life right now. At level 100, this is going to go closer to like 13,000 probably. And then a temerity can get up to 80% of that, right? So if you compare that to this aspect of the protector, this is 779 item power, which is quite high, right? Highest item power would be like 820, right? So whatever an 820 item power max barrier is not going to be as good as a 80% temerity now, right? So this is the kind of stuff that we're looking at. We keep the hot, like here's a 801 item power, and it can roll up to 6,460, right? So you can see how the item power affects this. So this is, call it 780. It goes up to 5,750. We can run that. And then this is an 801, and this goes up to 6,450. So it's like 700 points of barrier at 20 item power, right? So another 20 item power, maybe this goes up to a 7,000 point barrier at top, something like that, right? And we can probably go on max roll and check that out. Here's a max disobedience, which I should probably put on my amulet, right, to max it out. And then, cheats that are better than 20%. Trying to get high values of Stolen Vigor. So like this 104 Stolen Vigor, it's probably time to get rid of that one. I've got another Stolen Vigor somewhere. Yeah, so like this Stolen Vigor, for example, I need to break that down. And then so this is a good example. So like, I only want to keep 2 of these. I'll keep this 184, and I'll extract this 269, and then I'll get rid of this 104, right? And currently I have equipped a 157. So this is kind of how you manage your inventory, is to keep your stash from not filling up. You have to be disciplined about only keeping your 2 best versions of any given aspect, and you have to be comfortable getting rid of the crappier versions of these things, right? So that extends to gloves, boots, and jewelry. Jewelry becomes even more challenging because of the three different what do you call it? The sockets. So with the 3 different colored sockets, right, we have to know what colored Malignant Hearts we're prioritizing, and for Rogue, the Brutal, so the blue sockets, are going to be the ones we care the most about, and we've got some pretty good rings that we're getting ready to switch into. So if I look at these two rings, right, this is exactly what I was talking about on the previous sheet. So like this one, for example, has critical strike chance, critical strike damage, vulnerable damage, and a fourth slot to roll the tertiary, right? So this one is great because it's got max life right now in the tertiary roll, and I can roll that into lucky hit chance. So this is effectively a 4 out of 4 ring. All of the values could be higher, but it's a really good starting point for endgame ring, right? Here's another one where we've got vulnerable damage and critical strike chance, max roll on critical strike chance. We've rolled into critical strike damage, so we've rolled into our 3 primary stats, and the fourth stat is one of our tertiaries that we're good with, lucky hit chance, right? So these two rings are basically the final rings, or at least endgame rings, right? They're not perfect, but these are 2 endgame rings with 2 blue sockets, which is exactly what I'm looking for. That means then that in my current setup with the ice build, if I use these 2 blue socketed rings, I have to have a red socketed amulet so that I can use the clustered munitions heart, right? I've also got like some umbrals, right? So like these are pretty coveted to get the 4 out of 4 umbral. So I got a 4 out of 4, a 3 out of 4, and another 3 out of 4. I'm thinking about switching this aspect, the Ravenous, into Umbral. I think Umbral will probably perform better. And then from like the utility ones that I've been saving up, I've got ones that are like the synergy ones. So like this is if you were running cold and poison imbue. This one is if you're running any cold setup with Penitent Greaves, you want Frostbitten. Manglers was kind of an early game aspect that we don't really need anymore because we don't really need additional ways to daze things. So we might get rid of that. Shared aspect, this is a max roll. We might have some use for that. We don't really need the Manglers. We're more interested in the Frostbittens. And Quickening Fog has been cool. This is something that we're saving now as well as the Quickening Fogs. For mobility ones, we've got Ravagers, obviously. And then we got like a high roll Ghost Walker, so like a max rolled Ghost Walker, even though you might not use it, it's still in there. If I was really disciplined, I would cut down to 2 Ravagers and get rid of the Ghost Walker, right? Or I would get rid of one of the Umbrals, but these are too rare to give up. And then for gems, we're only keeping Royal Emeralds and Rubies because those are the only ones that we socket. Everything else, we're just keeping a stack of the highest ones that can drop, which are these flawless ones. So we don't really need to pick up gems anymore outside of emeralds and rubies. And then for malignant hearts, we only keep the 2 best ones that we might consider using, and then we break down the rest of them. So for vicious offensive hearts, we keep cluster munitions, we keep tempting fate, and we keep dark dance. For brutal defensive hearts, we keep trickery, we keep revenge. For devious hearts, we keep clip shot. We might not even want to keep clip shot, but if we have like a crowd control related build, we might want to consider this. But I really did not like the knockback on the marksman skills, so we could very easily just get rid of the vicious hearts. And then for Wrathfuls, obviously we're keeping one of each Wrath, or 2 of each Wrathful. So we keep our Barbers, and we like the ones that are rolled closer to 2%, or 2 seconds, excuse me. So we definitely want the level 5 with the 15% multiplicative increase, and we want it close to as 2 seconds as possible. And then Creeping Death for the poison build, right? So here we want high percent, right? And then Malignant Pact is kind of like the least important one. This was a good early game heart. We don't really need it now. And then Vile Apothecary, obviously, right? We want as close to 15% on Vile Apothecary as possible, with as close to 100% on the potency, right? And then you want these to be highest item power possible for the armor value. And then level 5 is also important for the roll of the ranges, right? So like a level 5 Vile Apothecary can go up to 15% for the chance to, it's not a lucky hit, it's just a flat 15% chance to apply all immune effects at a 90 to 100% potency. The level 5 is what lets this be 90 to 100%, right? So that's kind of the inventory management setup. And then if I look at my kind of season journey and my renown, right? So on a season journey front, I've completed every single objective in all of the chapters except for the final chapter. I've got 3 objectives left on the final chapter, which is 15 world bosses. I'm at 9 of 15. And then the other things are kill Uber Lilith and reach level 100, right? So I'm at level 90. I'll eventually reach level 100. I'll eventually kill Uber Lilith. And then we'll see if I get one of these, if I get the boss kills before that. The battle pass is obviously maxed out, and I'm just waiting to get the levels I need to claim the rest of the Smoldering Ashes, and then the rest of the Smoldering Ashes will be redeemed for the seasonal blessings, right? And they're about to up this Urn of Aggression from plus 8% to plus 20% in tomorrow's patch. And then in terms of World Renown, I'm at 4 out of 5 for each zone, and I'm currently working on getting the additional Paragon points for each zone. The way to do this is definitely going to be with the side dungeons at 40 renown per side dungeon. And then if you can get a side quest and a side dungeon that overlap, that's obviously the best play, right? So this is kind of where we're at, is we are trying to get to a point where, so the way I've done this Paragon board, right, is I know that I was just basically working on maxing out 2 additional boards, right? And then if I cleared all this, I would probably have enough points right now to stretch into a 4th board, and I've got which one I want to do lined up. But I kind of want the additional Paragon points first. So I'm going to get all the world-renowned Paragon points, and then I will just be left with the level 90 to 100 Paragon, which at 4 points a level is basically 40 points, right? So I'll have 40 points in Paragon left on the table, and I should be able to stretch easily into 3, maybe 4 additional boards, and then try to min-max them. This is not min-maxed at all. This is kind of just the rare clusters are completely filled in for whatever rare cluster I wanted, right? And then, you know, in terms of glyph leveling, this is kind of the best part about glyph leveling is this combat glyph, for example, is maxed out. This is 21, level 21, which is the max, and the scaling bonus, right? For every 5 intelligence purchased within range, you deal 9.9% increased critical strike damage, right? So when you socket the glyph, you need to get all of the intelligence nodes within the glyph radius, right? And then for Rogue, 49 is the maximum amount of intelligence that you can get in any of the sockets on any of the boards, right? So a 49 intelligence times 9.9 increased critical strike damage, this plus 97% increased critical strike damage is the absolute maximum that you can squeeze out of this combat glyph, right? And, you know, this is kind of cool because this is the one thing that doesn't have any variance to it, right? So on our gear, the affix rolls are variable, right? So like critical strike damage on a ring or a piece of or a weapon has a range, but this is deterministic. Like we can get this up to the 97% critical strike damage every time just by grinding it out, right? And if we look at our stat sheet, right, we have 307.5 critical strike damage. So if I take that off, it's going to go all the way down to 210, right? So you can see that, right? 210. So what that means is that that glyph is contributing about a third of our critical strike damage, right? So that shows how valuable the glyphs are. I mean, that's extremely important to get these glyphs maxed out for our stat sheet, right? So where we're at right now is we've got I think 6 glyphs. Yeah, we've got 6 glyphs to level 15. And then the mistake I made on my barbarian is I took another 6 glyphs to level 15. And what I should have been doing instead is taking the glyphs to maximum, taking them to level 21. And that's what I'm going to do on my rogue here. So the last 10 levels, 90 to 100, the grinding goal for that is really to max out the glyphs so that when you have all of your Paragon points, you have all your Paragon points plus maxed out glyphs, and then you're really achieving max power because the aspects are not easy to get, but you should be able to get your high rolled aspects fairly easily. And your gear, you should be able to get all the uniques you need, and you should be able to get end game gear if you're, being disciplined about reviewing all of your gear at the end of your runs. And then that only leaves maxing out the Paragon board, which requires you to get to a level 100 and requires that you level up all your glyphs. And then once I get to level 100 with maxed out power, we're going to switch into the 2 builds that we had discussed in the last video. The one build is the Bursting Venoms build, which is the Uberlilith build. And then the other build is the Infiltrator Poison Trap build, which is going to be the push build to clear the level 100 Nightmare Dungeon. So that's basically our goal here for the remainder of the season, is we're just going to get our guy to 100, do the final pinnacle activities, which is the Uber Boss kill and the level 100 Nightmare Dungeon, with a character at max power, and then we'll basically be all good, and we'll be able to retire this rogue. And then for Season 2, we'll play a Sork. In Season 2, they will have fixed resistances, and the Sork is kind of the resistance scaling class, right? So Barbarian scales on Strength, Rogue scales on Dexterity, Sork scales on Intelligence. Intelligence is also the stat that drives up resistances. So in the next season, Sork will be an interesting opportunity. And then I'll have played the 3 starting classes all basically to max power. I just need to finish up the Barb in the Eternal Realm, which isn't a big deal. I'll get to that whenever I get to that. So yeah, this is basically just the state of where we're at with our rogue. I think this is going pretty well. And then the last thing I'll say is you can see from an inventory management perspective what it takes just to, do something fun like hang on to all of your uniques, right? I could easily sell off the ones that aren't the best. Like, look how many freaking Grasps of Shadows I have, right? I could easily sell these away, right? But I'm just keeping them in inventory because it's just kind of fun to see, okay, how many uniques am I actually dropping, right? And then, the other thing is, well, how do you play an alt, right? Like, if I wanted to play 3 characters, a rogue, a Sork, and a barbarian in Season 1, how do you even do that? You do not have enough dash space to do that. So what would make sense is that all 5 of these tabs should not be shared, right? The tabs should be character specific, and then maybe have one shared stash tab for like your gems or your potions or your sigils or something, right? So it would make sense to not have all these stash tabs be shared. I have no idea why they're doing that. And then, the other thing that they changed is they made it a lot easier to drop these Wrathful Malignant Invokers. So you can just straight up farm for hearts by running the tunnels over and over again. I like it a little better where rather than just doing like target farming it's not like an exploitive way, but it's more just like the type of grind that I don't like, where you're actually not finishing the tunnels. You're just going in, killing the elites, and leaving and resetting, right? I'd rather just finish the tunnel, right? So I like that they made the Wrathful Malignant Invokers more available, which means every single tunnel that I run, I get a guaranteed Wrathful Heart drop. And then you can see if we're only keeping the best ones, right? So like my Barbers, Vile Apothecaries, Malignant Pact, and then my Creeping Deaths, right? So like you can see the difference between the level 4 and the level 5. You get the increased damage point there. So like right now, I've got a 2.0 at 14%, and I've got a 2.3 at 15%. And I've got 25 Malignant Invokers that I can run for 25 guaranteed Wrathful Hearts. And then I've got all this Ichor that I can gamble for random hearts, right? And then you would just take your before doing that, you would max out the Urn of Malignance to increase the potency of the heart drops, right? So overall, this is all very straightforward. There's a lot of complaints about Diablo 4, and I think most of it is just about the repetitive nature of the grind or how difficult it is to take a character to 100. I think the only valid gripe here is how difficult it is to set up alts and the time commitment involved in getting a character to max power. If you're committed to just getting one character to max power, it's very doable. If you want to experiment with multiple characters, the grind is just way too long, and the inventory management is not there to support it. But if you played Diablo 3 and you grinded out legendary gems, like that's not that different than what we're doing grinding out the rare glyphs. It's basically the same activity. You run the Greater Rift or you run the Nightmare Dungeon. At the end, you level up a gem or you level up the glyph. You do your sell salvage inventory, and then you repeat, right? So the gameplay loop is basically exactly the same as the Diablo 3 gameplay loop, and that's probably the main criticism, is that the loop and the grind is similar. In Diablo 4, you can hit max power, which you can't actually do in Diablo 3 because Paragon was scaling infinitely. I believe they finally put a cap on Paragon as well, and they definitely put a cap on the Greater Rift level at 150. So in Diablo 3, there are like endgame goals in terms of like how high you can get your character's power and how high of a Greater Rift level you can get to. So really the biggest complaint here is that D4 isn't really improving on the D3 formula in any way. And then another knock is that it also lacks a lot of the quality of life features that D3 has. There's no like armory where you can save builds. The rolling mechanic for re-rolling gear fixes is significantly worse in Diablo 4. Although now I'm at a point where I don't have to roll constantly, and the economy makes more sense. So when you get to about 10 million gold and like 300 veiled crystals, then you can easily roll for like one or two types of items. So if you get to 10 million gold and 300 veiled crystals, which is only a couple hours of grinding, then you can say re-roll like all your rings and amulets, right? So you can basically craft all your rings and amulets that you need with that much economy, which isn't so bad, but it could be way more lenient. They could definitely reduce the cost of things, but when you're in endgame, it's not all that bad. But there's definitely plenty of gripes about the game, but I've been having fun with it, and I will definitely be getting this character to level 100 before Season 1 closes out. I'm also playing Armored Core 6, which is a lot of fun. And then I've also got Baldur's Gate 3, which is downloaded and installed. And I'm also going to get Starfield eventually as well. So there's a lot of good games out right now. Not playing Diablo 4 every day, but I've obviously put in enough hours to get where I am now. And I'll put in the remaining hours I need to get the goals that I'm trying to accomplish here accomplished, and I'm still having fun with it. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching. Take care. Have a great day.